All right, welcome in. We're gonna give people just a few more minutes to get in the door, and then I'll kick things off. Got a lot of content to cover today, so I will jump right in just one more minute. All right, y'all. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Ruthie Ditzler, and I'm a career coach with the Talent Career Coaching Collective. And I'm excited to talk about this idea of career clarity. Like, how the heck do we figure out what we're doing with our lives? This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I'll share a little bit more about that in a second. Um, Okay, let me see if I can. I got a lot of really amazing stock images to go with this presentation today, so hopefully that lights you up. Um, I'll go into first just a quick introduction, an introduction to myself, and then also the Career Coaching Collective. I'll talk through quickly just why it is that career clarity can be so hard to find. Why is this such a challenging topic for so many people? I'll walk through 5 steps for figuring out what you actually want to do and thinking about some ways that you can experiment with trying new things. And I'll save time at the end for a Q&A. And then there'll also be a special offer at the end of the webinar. Um, Brandi is behind the scenes monitoring the chat and the Q&A. I will also keep my eye on the chat as well. So if you have questions that come up while I'm talking, please don't hesitate to just add those to the chat and I will address things as I see them in the chat. And yeah, so really quickly, a little bit about me. So I love career coaching because it's something that was really supportive in my own life. And I work with clients who are generally people who followed the quote unquote right path, right? They feel like they went to school and they've sort of landed a good job and they, on paper look like they're going in the right direction, but they're still feeling lost or disconnected, not really sure why their job isn't clicking, like why they're not feeling satisfied. And so I like to work with clients to help them develop more clarity, more confidence, and just a deeper sense of alignment between their career and and their life, and that is my area of expertise. I really feel like career coaching is so valuable because it's a ripple effect. If more people were doing work that they loved to do, this world would be a better place. We would kind of radiate that like positive energy as we moved about our worlds, and I think that that would rub off on other people. So that's a big part of what why I do what I do. There's a little bit about Brandi here as well. She is, like I said, behind the scenes answering questions in the Q&A. So don't hesitate to put questions in the chat. And just a quick intro to the coaching collective. So this talent career coaching is based in Vancouver, Washington, but the coaching collective is a group of coaches that serves clients all across the US and even some in Canada. In general, we really want to help people find more contentment in the work that they do. And we provide coaching services through all different stages of your career, whether, you're a new grad or an early career professional doing some of that exploration, someone who's moving into a leadership role and wants more support, maybe someone who's navigating burnout. And so, in general, we want to provide education and encouragement and partnership as you pursue those aspirations in your career, because we know it's a big life focus and we don't think you should have to navigate all of that alone. Okay, so a little bit about me and why I like to talk about career clarity. So I'll just start by saying, like, I don't have the magic. This isn't like something where I'm like, here's 5 steps to like completely transform your career and you're gonna snap your finger. and do these things and it's going to like land in your lap. Okay. That's my caveat. It's not that simple. This is hard work. This work takes time. And I remember so vividly this feeling when I was younger, having kind of recently graduated from college. I just so badly wanted someone to be like, Ruthie, here's what you're going to do with the rest of your life, right? Or like having a lightning bolt come down and just be like, here's this like, stroke of inspiration, like, aha, you've unlocked the thing. And that's not how it works. I'm sorry to break it to you. I wish that as a career coach, I had the secret, key to that sense of just like, this is the one thing. Okay. Um, but for me, what my experience is that I kind of followed this path that was really influenced by what people said around me and kind of about me about what I should be doing with my life. And, I studied Spanish and international affairs in school because I really loved to travel. I loved experiencing new cultures. And there was just this like narrative, like, oh yeah, Ruthie's so like well traveled and is going to work for some international nonprofit. Um, when in reality, I graduated and I just had no idea what that meant, or even if that's the type of work that I really wanted to do. And I didn't understand how to have this like grounded sense of like which direction to choose. So I ended up trying all these different things. At one point, I had 3 jobs and 2 internships, and I was just like, I was just like, I got to do it all to figure it out. And that led to burning out and to kind of a pattern of burnout where I would move into a job, not like out of any sort of like intention or like this is a good fit, so I'm going to take this step. It was more like fear-based. Like, oh, I need a job. I'm just going to pick the thing that's sort of like the path of least resistance that I know that I can do and not think about any sort of like deeper sense of alignment. And that led to me burning out multiple times. And it wasn't until I slowed down and actually took the time to do this work, this hard work that I'm talking about, and really thought about my values, really thought about my strengths, that I ended up on a path that's been incredibly fulfilling. So that's why I'm here today. And that's sort of my personal connection to this type of work. So, why is career clarity so hard to find? I just want to go through a few of these reasons why, oftentimes people are racking their brain like this isn't a simple fix to figure out what we should be doing with our lives. So, I think one of the first things is that we are taught to focus on sort of other people's expectations, this idea of like, what do you want to be when you grow up, as opposed to what kind of life do you want to live, right? We're thinking about the job title, we're thinking kind of more about prestige before we understand our own values and our motivations and strengths. And so that leads us to kind of crowdsource our decisions based on what other people expect, and then we're disconnected from the path, right? We land something, but it's not necessarily something that feels aligned. Another challenge is that the world of work is constantly changing. So many of the jobs today didn't exist even 10 years ago, and that trend is accelerating. So there's lots of change going on. There's no longer this sort of like one clear path, right? I think back to my grandparents who had, my grandfather had one job his whole career and just climbed the ladder. Now it's more there's sort of like this like wide open kind of like jungle gym of possibilities. And that leads to analysis paralysis where we're like afraid of choosing the wrong path or missing out on something. So we just don't make a choice. Another thing is this idea that in our culture in the US in particular, this idea of like our career is really equated with our identity. Okay. So when we don't have a clear career path, it feels like we are lost oftentimes. And that pressure alone can make people feel stuck. They can feel ashamed. They can feel like they're behind. And that negative self-talk can really impact decision making and forward moving action. This, the fourth one, this idea, like we haven't been taught how to explore, just how to achieve. One of my favorite books is called Brave, Not Perfect. Highly recommend. It talks just about this topic. So we are socialized to kind of like check these boxes, right? Like you graduate from school, you get good grades, you get an internship, maybe you go to college, check, 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 check. But we're not taught to like experiment. And what happens when you try something and you fail? And how do you reflect on like what did and didn't go well? And how do you pivot to something based on what you learn? Okay. And that stuff is actually really valuable out in the world. Those skills to be able to like try and like not succeed. What's our resilience there? Fear of making the wrong choice, especially for people who are thoughtful, who are introspective, this can be paralyzing. Those of us, myself included here, who want to gather all the information possible, we want to wait to take action until we're 100% sure. 100% sure isn't like a real thing. So, what ends up happening is we stay stuck, right? Stuck in a job, stuck in indecision, kind of waiting for that clarity before we act. And then the final thing is just this idea that like our lives and our needs are constantly evolving. What works for you, what was a great fit when you were 22, I had a long stint of working in restaurants and that was awesome. And what was a great fit for me at 22 is not the same at 32 and won't be the same at 42. My definition of fulfillment has shifted over my life as it does for many people. And so we expect that we're going to like, that lightning bolt is going to strike. We're going to get clarity, and that clarity is going to be permanent. When in reality, it's something that we have to re-engage with at all of these different stages of our lives. Okay, so there's a lot going on here for why this is so hard for people to figure out. So, what's the alternative here? The alternative is this process of self-inquiry, experimentation, reflection, and adjustment. Okay. The goal is not to find the perfect job forever. The goal is to move closer to what feels meaningful and energizing and aligned with you as you evolve throughout your life. Okay. So, what are the steps? And this is what I'll be going through today is some of these ideas here. So when you're trying to figure out what you really want to do, it's this idea of like creating your compass, right? How can we actually like have a guiding tool that helps us make meaningful career decisions? And we'll talk about values and employer and job characteristics and this idea of creating a one-year vision as a way to guide ourselves. The other thing is to look to your past for patterns and clues. And so I'll talk about this idea of doing kind of like a work history reflection or creating a career portfolio to pull out some of those patterns. And then another piece that's super important is activating your network. So in every single webinar I do, and I feel like in every single conversation I have, informational interviews are something that I'm always going to plug. They're so important. So we'll talk about that a little bit. This concept of coming up with a board of advisors, how you can use that, or mentors to help you make decisions. And then this concept of experimenting. How do we actually move forward and take action to get clarity? Okay, I don't see any questions so far, so I'm going to jump right in. Loving these stock photos. I hope you are too. Okay, so why do core values matter when we're thinking about career? So your values are the compass that guide your decisions. And when you're out of alignment with your values, you will feel dissatisfaction, even in jobs that look good on paper. Okay. If you value peace and nonviolence, that's one of your core values, and you're working in a company where indirectly your contributions are going towards maybe building weapons that are used in international wars, you're going to feel some cognitive dissonance with what you're doing. Okay. If you value adventure and spontaneity and growth, and you're working for a company that is really well established and has super, very hierarchical company with very clear, regimented processes for making change, it's likely that there's going to be some dissatisfaction there, right? You're going to feel out of alignment. So going through to figure out like what actually matters to you, one of the ways I like to start is just having people do a free write. So however this works best for you, whether you're doing it by hand, whether you're typing into a document, what's your ideal day like? What excites you the most? What are you most proud of? You know, what are, if your close friends and family were interviewed and asked what matters to you, what would they say? Even things like thinking about some of your favorite memories, like a peak memory in your life. What was that like? How were you feeling? What makes the memory so powerful? What do you want less of in your life? What do you experience as being most challenging? Just getting a bunch of thoughts down on paper. Okay. And then you can kind of do these things like making clusters with your values. So circling keywords or pulling out things that match, right? Friends and community could go together, or integrity, transparency, honesty, right? You're like pulling things out where you're seeing themes and kind of like chunking them together. And then one of the tools that I really love is it comes from the book, What Color is Your Parachute? And maybe Brandi can put that one in the chat too. So the author of What Color is Your Parachute designed this prioritizing grid that I use all the time with clients and in my own life that helps you compare. It takes a list of 10 things and you can compare all the things to all the other things to determine like how you actually would really rank those things. There's an online free version of this at beverlyryle.com. This other coach created a digital version that they share across, as the digital version of this tool. And I find that that's really helpful for getting down to sort of like what is the exact order of what matters most. Okay. So then you have your list of values, which you can use when you're evaluating different directions to head. And Brandi, if you could put it in the chat too, talent, we do have a worksheet that's about values and kind of gives some suggestions for different types of values and gives you an opportunity to define what those things mean to you, which can be a really helpful exercise too. So next step is, what are your must-haves? Okay, you cannot figure out what the right fit is if you don't know what that means to you. Okay. And this is getting specific about what you need in your next role. And the way that you can do that is by reflecting on past work experiences. What did you love? Like, think of the job that you've loved best. Or if you're a recent grad or someone who doesn't have as much work experience, what are volunteer things or projects, things that you just generally love doing, hobbies, things that you do in your personal life? Like, what do you love about that? What are some things that you hate, right? Think about jobs that you've really disliked and why was that? And then you can, again, go through and pull out some of those key job and workplace characteristics. So Brandi, I think, can put in the chat as well. We have worksheets for both of those things. One is just kind of considering different day-to-day characteristics or tasks that might be present in a career. Another is thinking about things like what does your employer offer? Things like PTO, what's their PTO policy? How much flexibility is there? What's the compensation like? Is it hybrid or remote? Is it mission-driven work? Are there growth opportunities? There are so many different things that go into the factor into whether or not we're feeling satisfaction with our career outside of just like, what are you getting paid, right? So getting some of those things down, right? What's a list of 10 things that really matter to you? Use that prioritizing grid again. A lot of times when I'm working with clients, someone might say, oh yeah, salary is the most important thing. And then when we go through that activity, it actually turns out that salary might rank 7th or 8th on that list. And in fact, what they care more about is PTO or just general flexibility, right? So it can be really helpful to get that list ranked. And then you can decide, okay, in my list of 10 things, I have it ranked. What's non-negotiable here and what's a nice to have? So maybe it's the top 3 or the top 5 things on that list. Those are non-negotiables. In order to apply for a job or even consider a role, you need to know that it has those things. And then the other stuff would be amazing, but it's not a deal breaker. Okay. How this comes into play, like a recent example with a client, I have a client who's looking around for jobs to apply for. She came to me in a session recently with a job listing she's considering, and there were a few things that stood out to me that were sort of contrasting with her pre-established things that we had gone over that were non-negotiables for her, right? So this client brought a job that had a salary range that was much lower than her sort of non-negotiable, my salary needs to be this high. And it also was a job at a really large company. Okay. And this is a person who's identified that she likes to feel that she wants to know that her work has made a meaningful impact and she wants to be recognized for the work that she's done. And that's not impossible at a large company, but it's just a little bit more difficult. So when we went through this process of kind of like analyzing whether or not she should apply for this job, we were looking at that list. What are her must-haves? And in the end, she decided to apply for the role, but because it only hit a few of her top 10, she determined that she wasn't going to put as much energy into that as she might for jobs that really were hitting all of those, must-haves. Okay. So this is just, again, you're making a tool that's like a decision-making thing. It helps you when we're job seeking. I've done this many times. It's sort of like you just want it to end. And so you find jobs where you're like, like, okay, I hit like these things, right? Like I meet these qualifications. I'm just going to apply, right? Maybe they'll take me. Maybe I can get a job and not have to be job hunting anymore. And that's a completely valid reaction. But what it's not taking into consideration is like what you want out of the job. Okay. So using this must-haves list can be super helpful. Okay. Next is creating a vision. Okay. So this helps us shift from like that sort of like, what should I do with my life to what am I building? Okay. It's a more empowering way of looking at things. The clearer the vision of what it is that you want to make with your life, the easier it is for you to decide the steps to take along the way and the kind of sharper your instincts get as you go. Okay. So this is like a 1-year snapshot where you're like 1 year from today, if you've achieved success, whatever that means to you, you're going to do a reflection. Okay. And again, this is brain dump, whether you're writing or typing, however goes best for you. Maybe you're talking into your talk to text. That could work well too. A year from now, you've achieved wild success. What does that mean? You wake up. How do you start your day? How are you feeling? Are you waking up early in the morning or is it leisurely? Are you going into an office or are you working from home in your pajamas? Are you doing project-based work that's kind of cyclical, or do you have like a very set routine where you're just doing the same thing every day? Like, what does that look like for you? What projects, what are you putting your energy into? What are you proud of? Like, how are you spending your time? Getting that all down on paper. Like, what in the most perfect world, what would that mean for you? Okay. And using this sort of type of visualization, that like the sense of sort of journaling helps you tap into your intuition and helps you unlock ideas that you wouldn't necessarily be able to tap into if you were using that kind of left brain logic based part of our mind that we're often using when we're thinking about career stuff, right? And then the next thing to consider is this idea of what parts of that vision are already present in your life, even if it's just a little bit, right? In what ways is your vision statement already true? How can you kind of lean in the direction of the things, the areas of your life where you see that vision already present? Okay. So just another thing to consider. And again, this takes time. Most of us don't give ourselves the time and space to do this type of reflection, but it can be incredibly insightful. Okay, then next step is thinking about your past. Okay, that sweet spot for your career is at the intersection of what you're good at, what energizes you, and what's meaningful. So it's your skill sets, your strengths, and your values. And you can look back in order to make decisions about how to move forward. So, starting with kind of this work history reflection, again, dumping something into a document, doing that brain dump. What are your last 5 or 10 projects or jobs or volunteer roles, or just kind of like where have you focused your energy? And what were key activities you did? What are marketable skills that you can identify? What do people come to you for advice about? What are specific results that you've helped people or organizations achieve? What were your proudest accomplishments? What were the things you most loved doing? Okay. Getting all that stuff down. And then this sort of energizing versus draining audit. Thinking back over those past experiences, what roles or tasks lit you up, got you super excited, where you were in flow state, or you just finished your day and you're like, oh, that was awesome. Like, what a great work day. Or alternatively, like, what drains you, where you're just like, you end the workday and you're just like, oh my God, like, I don't know what that was, but I feel like crap, right? So taking the time to pinpoint that stuff. And if you're currently working, you can actually keep a notebook on the side of your desk or wherever you work. And at the end of the day, kind of do a quick 5 minute jot down of like, what were the things day by, going through the day? What did I do? Did I like this or not? Was this energizing or not? And circling like, oop, this was really energizing. Okay, I'm going to keep a note of that. Okay. And then you can look for themes. And this is a really great use of AI. Okay. If you take all of this content that you've produced where you're reflecting on your work history, put it into a chatbot and say, hey, I'm looking for themes. I'm looking for, skills that I use or, kind of general like themes that you can pull out as you're looking over my like work history and see what is synthesized there and what's generated for you. And you might find some patterns that give you clues like, oh, yeah, for example, there's someone I work with right now who really loves doing investigative work. She really loves getting to the bottom of stuff. And she likes being given the time and the autonomy to dig into something. And so that's going to influence what type of company she wants to work for, knowing that that's the type of work that she really loves to do. Okay, and finally, the step 5 is this idea of not doing this alone, right? Letting other people help you explore. One tip that worked, this is an exercise that worked really well for me when I was doing my own career exploration, which was to crowdsource ideas. And this is not crowdsourcing like actual like decisions about what I did, but it was just going to friends and family and being like, in an ideal world, if money wasn't an issue, what job do you think I would love doing best? And it was really awesome to get like, first off, people put so much time and love and energy into this. It was so amazing. And it was also really validating because it was like, whoa, there are like, these people are all saying the same things. Like, how cool is that, right? This theme of community kept building, coming back up. This theme of like helping others and supporting people. There was all these cool themes that were emerging that were aligning with what I was discovering about myself. And that's just like a really great, it's just a really supportive way to go to your community and be like, what do you think I'm good at? What do you think I should do? And again, informational interviews, this idea of like asking people for their stories, asking people for like information about their career paths as a way to get inspiration and ideas for what you might consider. Okay. And then this idea of finding mentorship. So you can do this by brainstorming a list of kind of like people you admire that you have strong ties to. So those are folks you're directly connected with. The 50/50s are people who are like, you know them a little bit, or maybe like through someone else, you could get an introduction. And then long shots are people that you don't know. They could be people you admire from afar. You're just like, wow, it would be incredible if I was able to have a conversation with this person. And coming up with lists of those folks and then reaching out to two or three people from each of those lists. Hey, I'm, doing some career exploration and I really admire what you do and I'm looking for advice about XYZ. Can I have 20 minutes of your time in the next couple of weeks? And seeing what comes out of that. And Brandi just put something in the chat that's a way to map out that concept of your board of directors. So definitely check that out. Okay. So very quick review of different tips. And I will say here that I want to close by coming up with some ideas of how to take action. Okay. Because clarity comes from action, confidence comes from experience. Okay. That common, uh, that common reaction that I mentioned before is that people are waiting, right? We're waiting to be 100% certain about our next moves before we try something new. We want to feel really clear, and our brains crave certainty. So we're convincing ourselves, like, oh, I'll apply for that job once I'm absolutely sure that, it's going to be the best fit. Or I'll reach out to that person once I have a better idea of exactly what it is that I want to ask them. Okay. But by taking small, low stakes action steps, talking to someone about something you're curious about, volunteering, trying a passion project, that's what's actually giving you real information and getting you out of your head and getting you into your life, where then you're able to suss out like, oh, do I like this or not? Do I like this or not? And like wading through those options. Okay. So if you're stuck, it's this idea of what's one tiny experiment that I could try even if I don't feel ready. Okay. What would I learn if I took just one step? So here are some thoughts that I have about how to experiment with a potential career path. Okay. And I'll go through this slide and then I will open it up for any questions that we have. So if you have questions, please go ahead and stick those in the chat. So, informational interviews. If you have questions about what this means, we have a recording from a previous webinar that's up on the Talent YouTube channel that I highly recommend. But essentially, can you talk to different people who work in the roles or industries that you're curious about? These are informal, they're conversations where you're not asking for a job, you're just asking about their day-to-day, the skills they use, challenges they've experienced, what surprised them, just generally getting them to talk about themselves and what they do as a way for you to gather more information. Okay. And it helps because you get insider knowledge about that role and about that company. And you kind of get this gut check like, oh, would I like this or not? Like, ooh, I just talked to a project manager and they said X, Y, and Z. And that really turned me off. So that might shift my direction. So it can just be really helpful for like eliminating or exploring new options. Another idea is to volunteer or take on a micro project, right? This is sort of a low stakes, short term opportunity to contribute. Maybe you're volunteering with an organization that does similar work to what you're exploring, or you could offer to help a friend or a nonprofit with a project. And this is a way to build hands-on experience and gain skills. And then you're also observing how that work makes you feel in practice. So are you energized or drained when you're doing that type of thing? You can shadow someone. So this is just actually going to someone's workplace and spending a few hours or a day tagging along and kind of observing what they do. You could sit in on their meetings. You're kind of watching their workflow. and you could offer something in exchange, right? You could take them out for coffee, you could endorse them on LinkedIn or, give a recommendation. But being able to kind of get that insider perspective, you'll understand what their day-to-day actually entails, not just what's in their job description. Freelancing, consulting, trying a beta version is like if you have this idea, skills you want to contribute or market, maybe do that on Upwork or Fiverr or, there's other freelancing platforms, or offer it to your personal network, or run a pilot program or try a beta version of something. If you're doing design work, or you're tutoring, or you're coaching. And again, this is a really great way to like not only validate your interest in something, but see what people are willing to pay, or like how they're going to engage with what you're doing. Like you're getting direct feedback about whether that's a viable option. Attending a workshop or taking a course to build skills and kind of assess whether you like using those skills in action. You could do that personal passion project. This is, again, aligned with work you want to explore, starting a blog, designing a website, building a data project, organizing events. And that really gives you portfolio material, your skill building, and you're getting that firsthand experience of what goes into that type of work. And then finally, you could do temp work or part-time work in something that's related. So again, when we're thinking about stepping stone careers, it's like even if this isn't your dream job, it gives you context for like what the dynamics are of that workplace, what the culture is, different viable career paths and stuff like that. So you're trying something without the pressure of a long-term commitment. Okay, I know we are coming up on time. Brandi, are there any questions? Don't see any questions in the chat. Any questions coming through?
I haven't seen any questions yet, but if you do have them, you can either throw them in the chat, or you can put them in Q&A. I'll go ahead and give you a couple of minutes there, and then I'm going to go ahead and look and see if there were any questions that came through when people registered. So give me just 1 second.
Awesome. I'm curious for anyone who's joining us live, if there are different ways that you've experimented when you're thinking about kind of like career paths or different job titles that you might be interested in. What are some ways that you have tried that out? Or, have you tried anything that's on this list, on this slide right here? You could share that in the chat. I know for me, one of the things that I did when I was basically, I was burnt out at a job. I gave myself 6 weeks where I had put in my notice and said I was leaving in 6 weeks. And my goal was to do as many informational interviews as possible. And I didn't really know what direction I wanted to head. So my parameter was that I just wanted to have as many conversations as I could with people who were doing work that I thought was cool or interesting. And I don't know, I think I talked to like 30 people. It was a lot. It was like a part-time job to have all these different informational interviews. But what it did is it really helped me narrow down some different pathways and eliminate some things that weren't going to be a good fit for me. And it actually indirectly, not like in that moment, but a couple years later, led me to one of my like most favorite jobs ever that I've ever had through one of those connections, and kind of like reflecting on what that person did and like the skills that she was using and how to see if that would be a good fit. Yeah, and so Emily just put in the chat, I've volunteered before to see if I was passionate about a career path. Yeah, that's a great way to try things out for sure. I've talked to my mentors, is what QL says. I talked to my mentors, but didn't get a pattern. Everyone had their own bias, or they had biased guidance. Yeah, that can be tricky if you're getting like different perspectives from people, but you aren't necessarily seeing a theme, which I think that's why it's very important to do that like baseline self-reflection first so that you know, right, you have that compass to guide you when you then go out into the world and you're getting other people's perspectives about what they think you should do. There's a question, how much time should I spend exploring each week? That's a really good question. I think it depends on where you are, if you're currently job seeking or if you're in a position where you're employed and you're just looking around for your next steps. I like, as someone who was that example I gave, I was employed and I was looking for my next steps. I was spending, it was probably like 3 or 4 hours a week outside of my full-time job doing some of this reflection work. I mentioned the book, What Color is Your Parachute? It's one of the oldest kind of career books out there. There's a really helpful sort of exercise for doing all this reflection on the different parts of what matters to you. And it's a lot of work, but I was doing some of that as part of that exploration. And then I would say if you're job hunting, there's sort of like a breakdown. It's like, how do you diversify your efforts? It helps to do some of this reflection first so that you're not spinning your wheels and kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall, is what we say when people just apply for any old position they see, right? So taking the time first to do this reflection is actually going to save you time and potentially burnout or just like having to move on from your next job quickly because it wasn't a good fit. So I kind of see it as like it's a front end investment that hopefully will really pay off and save you time later on. And so when you're job hunting, it's kind of a balance. Maybe you're spending 1 day of the week or 2 days of the week sending out job applications, but then you're actually chunking out time in your week where you can be doing some of this like dedicated self-reflection. Okay, so no other questions, and we are almost at time. So let me talk through a couple things that are coming up. The next webinar that I'll be running is going to be a month from now in August. And this is going to be about how to stand out in a crowded job market. So I have a lot of recruiters and hiring managers in my network, and this is going to be getting information directly from them. So if you register for this event, you can actually submit a question that you would like to ask a recruiter or hiring manager, and I'll kind of get that information, gather that from folks, and share it back out as part of this webinar. And then if you are based in the Portland area, part of this kind of self-reflection is creating that vision, right? And I love running vision boarding workshops where people are able to kind of tap into that right brain creativity and really think about what matters most to them. So I'm doing quarterly vision boarding workshops. The next one will come up in late September, so still solidifying that date, but it will be located at the Bakery Blocks in Northeast Portland. So keep an eye out for information about that on our website and on social media. And then an offer for folks who are on the webinar or people who are watching this on YouTube later on. If you are looking for that space and like carving out that time to actually do this clarity, like reflection process, I want to offer a buy one, get one half off for coaching sessions with me. This can be really helpful. Like a lot of times we think about our goals and we think about what, we're doing this type of reflection on our own or just in our heads and not actually giving ourselves the time to do it. And it can be really helpful to just build that structure in and have accountability and support from a career coach. So that's what I did for my own career, and it was incredibly helpful. And I would love to offer that to other folks as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can connect with us on our website or through social media. And that's all on my end. And thanks so much for joining us today.